In this video, I'm going to talk about a common question that I've been getting about my grandfather, about why he stopped manifesting. Because the interview, if you watch the interview that I had with my grandfather, he did mention in that video that he had stopped manifesting, and he had a good reason for this. But I think this topic is very important to cover, and I want to cover some topics that are surrounding this, because this is really, really important. Because my grandfather, because if you watch the video, my grandfather talks about how you will have to work for it. When you change your concept of yourself, you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. You're going to be working night and day, depending on what you're doing and what you're creating. But I also want to address another side of this, which is the magical part of the law of assumption, because I do believe, and I have experienced it, and I've seen it firsthand, a lot of magical things that were created where people didn't have to do anything, using the law of assumption, like Neville Goddard himself, where he used to actually sit down and imagine something to happen, like this cruise ship, and getting the tickets and doing different things, like contacting someone in his imagination to call him in meditation, and they do that. There's a lot of magical things that can happen, but when you're changing your actual conception of yourself, when you change your version of yourself, your concept of yourself, and you're imagining having a lot of money, and you're actually working while you're visualizing this, like my grandfather's story, he was visualizing his studio being the talk of the convention, the Arthur Murray Dance Studio being the talk of the convention. And in order for that to happen, there was a lot of work that needed to be done. He was going to have to campaign. He was going to be doing this. He was going to be up night and day, all of these things that he was talking about. But he directed his imaginal act to actually creating this. And that required a lot of work. There are things that you can do that don't require a lot of work, but a lot of times, if you're not working for it, if you're not actually disciplining yourself and changing your concept of yourself to actually go after that and actually earn that, there's a part of this where you're just manifesting in vain. And I've actually experienced this myself, is why I can speak about it, because I have manifested things in my life to come to me very quickly, like a certain amount of money and things like that to come to me. But there was never that state of fulfillment unless I actually earned it. Like I was actually doing something of value and giving this to the world, like giving a value and a service to the world, and then getting the money as a side effect, versus winning the lottery or just getting a large amount of money, like gambling or something, visualizing these things. I mean, you can do all these things, they work, but you're manifesting these things in vain, because you're still the same version of yourself, and you're not going to have that state of fulfillment. At least for me, I didn't have that state of fulfillment, like I was providing some service or value to the world and then making a side effect of that. Like the money was coming to me as a side effect of what I was actually creating and giving a value and a service to the world. And what happens when I did this, when I was manifesting in vain, like getting a certain amount of money, it was always something that would happen, because internally and subconsciously, my beliefs would take over. After that, the subconscious mind would then turn on me, because once I tricked the subconscious mind to believe I had this money, but I didn't change my version of myself, something would come up where the money, I would have to spend the money on something. Something would happen, like my truck would break down, or, it would be something legally that would happen that would take the money from me. So it seemed like the more money I would manifest in vain, the more problems would come into my life. But when I started creating, my life, providing a value and a service to the world, and I was fulfilled doing that, there was no subconscious rejection of the money that I was making. And that's why I make my meditations the way that I do, about speaking about being successful. Like, you're a successful person, like imagining yourself as a successful person and your family congratulating you on your success. Like, you have changed your version of yourself. Not that you just won the lottery or something like this, or money just came to you and you didn't change yourself, but your family actually congratulating you because you've become a good person. You become a good person and a successful person, and you're actually giving them money because you've become this new version of yourself, and you're in this giving mode because you've created this life where you're now actually, giving value to the world, and now you've become this successful person, and now you're making money doing that. And that's why I have given a word of caution to, my audience. I've given a word of caution, just like Neville Goddard did to my grandfather when he was giving him this exercise to do, making $3 million. is when you're changing your concept of yourself, when you're visualizing something as yourself being this successful person, where it's a complete transformation of your version of your concept of yourself, you're going to go through drastic changes in order to get there. But you're going to enjoy yourself once you become this new person. Like this feeling of joy, of success, of being a successful person that gives value to the world, you are now fulfilled and now you can be happy. But the things that you're going to have to go through, depending on where your current concept of yourself is, may be a struggle. You may see things start to happen in your world. You're like, okay, why are these difficult things happening? Those difficult things are happening to develop you to be that person that can be successful. Because once you learn to overcome difficulties and you learn how to position yourself in your world, and no matter what happens, you can function to your highest level in chaos or whatever's going on. Once you're developed to that point, you're going to be successful. And there's nothing that's going to be able to throw you off your course in that new state of being. Because once you change your concept of yourself, you're now in a new state of being. Like your concept of yourself changing different states. You're changing different states from the lower state that you were in when you started now to your new concept of yourself. You're in a new feeling state. You're in a new state of being, and now you can create all of these things. So basically, you're on a new energy, a new frequency, a new feeling state all the time, and then you're imaging new things to come into your life. But sometimes you have to go through obstacles in order to get there. But a lot of times when you're manifesting, at least from my experience, when I was manifesting in vain, when I was just creating things, but I wasn't providing value or service, I wasn't happy with the money that I was getting. Like it didn't internally make me happy. I was not internally happy with any of it. I was still miserable because my self-concept wasn't developed. There's a big part of going through obstacles and difficulties that are gonna make you happy regardless. If the more things you go through in life, the more you can deal with, the more obstacles you'll be able to maneuver around and still maintain your happiness and see the greatest good in everything in your world. But if you have never gone through any obstacles or any difficulties, or you look at all the obstacles and difficulties as they were just like traumas and you're still like in that victim mentality, then those things aren't going to help you maneuver in your world now. You need to use all of those things as an instrument for your success now. So all the traumas you've been in, all the difficulties you've had to overcome, those are your superpower. Those are your instruments to create wealth and happiness and appreciation of your life and to help others and create a value and service to the world. All right, so I'm going to get back to the original topic of this video. I kind of went on a rant there, but the original topic of this video is why my grandfather, or why did my grandfather stop manifesting? And as you know, I mean, when I shot the interviews with my grandfather, he was in his late 80s. So he was in his 80s. He had already created so many things in his life. And he was at that point where he knew that if he were to create something, or he wasn't going to manifest something in vain, he was going to create something, and like what he did with his studios, he was going to create something like that where it's actually changing his concept of himself, and he's going to have to develop himself in order to get that, whatever that new thing would be. And he knew that he just didn't have that energy anymore. He was living in a state of gratitude and joy in his present concept of himself, and just enjoying the room, the house, and just going for walks and just enjoying the moment and just enjoying life in itself, the experience of life. So he was just in that point of his life where he was just enjoying being alive and just enjoying that. And he actually told me in confidence that was like the most fulfilling part of his life was in his 80s. Like when he was in his 80s, where he wasn't trying to create anything, he was just in a state of presence and just meditating and enjoying his life, the things that he had, and not creating all of these things. That was like the most fulfilling time of his life, and the most enjoyable part of his life was actually in his 80s when he was retired. He wasn't trying to manifest anything anymore, and he was just meditating and being present in the moment. And that's when he actually got it big into Alan Watts at this point, and Buddhism, and doing different meditations and things like that, where he was just focusing on the stillness of the mind and being present in the moment. And just like he said in the interview, that at one point in his life that he had to get laid at least 3 times a day, and he understood that would require a lot of work. Like when he was a businessman, he was a millionaire, those things came to him easily, but he was working all the time. He was doing this, he was doing that, he was campaigning, but he was getting all of these women, in his life. But these are the things that you have to do. And he knew that this requires a lot of work. So he was done with all that. He was finished with that in that point of his life, and he was just completed. But that's to answer your questions of why my grandfather stopped manifesting, because he was in his late 80s and he was done with all that. He was just enjoying the moment, enjoying the experience, enjoying life in general, and just getting ready to go back into his body, because like Neville Goddard explained to him, and other things that I've researched on, that when we die, you don't go anywhere. You're reincarnated, or your spirit goes into another body of around 20 years old. And I'm going to make some other videos on that and break this down. Neville Goddard actually went into this. My grandfather used to go in, and that's what he implicitly believed, that when he died, he was going back into a brand new body of around 20 years old. All right, guys, I love you, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm going to make some videos on this topic as well, so stay tuned. I love you, and I'll see you in the next video.